A very warm welcome from the Market Research Society of India, MRSI. We're delighted to invite you all to our event that kicks off the International Market Research Day, which is a worldwide celebration that the Market Research Fraternity and Insights Fraternity does under the aegis of ISOMA. I'm Mitali Chauhan. I'm the Director General of the MRSI. We are very, very lucky to have with us today, in the alphabetical order of the organizations, we have Rahul Kanodia, who's CEO of Datamatics Services, Global Services. We have Nazeeb Arif, who is EVP ITC Limited. We have Jonathan Hall, who's Managing Partner, Sustainable Transformation Practice of Kantar. We have Anirban Ghosh, Chief Sustainability Officer of the Mahindra Group. And last, but definitely not least, we have Suresh Narayanan, Chairman and Managing Director of Nestle India. Our topic today is brands can be both sustainable and profitable. Though we've put this across as a statement, it's obviously a statement that is open to challenge and open to debate. And we hope that we are able to share with you different points of views on whether this is indeed true or otherwise. So the first set of thoughts and insights that we're looking for our panel to share with us is around whether profitability and sustainability is a contradiction in itself. Is it possible for both to coexist? Or is it true that there's a different point of view that says that it's like two sides of a coin? You can have one, which is profitability, but equally well, you can have sustainability as well. We also will be hearing insights from our panel on what it's like to actually run a business with sustainability at the heart of it, with being on a sustainability journey, having an ambition to reach certain sustainability targets in 2030. And what does this journey look like? What are some of the challenges and roadblocks that have been experienced in getting there or getting started indeed? And also, we were wondering whether the journey that we're on as a nation in India, whether it's a typical journey, are there differences, are there any peculiarities of this market? And is there anything we can learn from other markets, or in fact, we can teach other markets because we're ahead of the curve? So this was really the broad context in which we had asked our panelists to think about what they would like to share. And Nazeeb, if you would be so kind as to kick off.
Thank you so much, Mitali. It's a pleasure to be at this forum of MRSI and also to be with the distinguished panelists, Mr. Narayanan, who we always hear a lot about. My friend Anirban, we haven't met for a long time now, and of course, Jonathan and Rahul. This is a subject very close to our heart, and you'll have to forgive me if we get a bit carried away, because I think we could carry on with this entire session of 1 hour to talk about it, but I'll try and address some of the issues that you raised, Mitali. And as I mentioned to you yesterday, sustainability at ITC is really a very integral part of the corporate strategy. It's not a bolt-on, and we believe that it's really a part of our organizational DNA for all of us. And therefore, the question that you raised right in the beginning, we do not see a conflict between, let's say, shareholder value creation and societal value creation. For us, I mean, the sustainability is about larger stakeholder value creation and what I would call a triple win, the triple win for the economy, for the environment, and a win for the society as well. And this is very important because, as enterprises, we draw very heavily on societal resources. And as enterprises, we are trustees of society as well. And therefore, it's not just a nice thing to do or a need to do. Today, sustainability has become a must do as well. And this is, I think, two critical issues that I would like to point out here, basically for all of us here. And these are the two critical challenges that we face as mankind and across the globe. One is, of course, climate change. That is the elephant in the room. And I think the other one is inequality when we talk about and its impact on livelihoods and jobs as we see it today. Climate change, of course, we know as a country in India itself, the last 7 years has been the most warmest in history. We have got a huge coastline. So you're looking at about 12 cities which are at risk. You're talking about 21 more which can run out of water. So it is an extremely different thing. And as Mr. Narayan would know, as a foods company, we are talking about 10 billion people in this planet. And as National Geographic said, in the next 40 years, you have to produce as much food as the world has harvested, the farmers have harvested for 8,000 years. That's the kind of challenge. On the other side, livelihoods, 10 million, 12 million people joining the workforce, and you need gainful livelihoods for that many people, without which you can have very unstable societies. So 25 years back when we started this journey, we said business cannot succeed in societies that fail. And therefore, we said we must have a paradigm of responsible capitalism where we'll be extremely competitive, but also enrich the environment and look at livelihood creation all together and simultaneously. And let me tell you this through examples. I think that's the best way of saying how profit and sustainability can go together. We have a paper business, which is India's largest paperboards business. And 25 years back, we were almost on the verge of closing it down because very clearly we could not scale it up for lack of pulp. And the government had very rightly said you cannot cut trees, and that's a good thing. So the idea was to import pulp at low import duty. And that's when we said we will not do it. We'll use a afforestation program. You cannot buy land. So we created an R&D program for over 12 years to draw samples to get clonal saplings, which could grow in wastelands. And today, by working with small farmers and tribals, you have 900,000 acres of forestry that you have done. And this has led to 160 million person days of employment. And this has not only made our businesses carbon positive, but also obviously a huge competitive source of pulp. So today, a business which is closing down has become India's #1. It has become an icon in the world for environmental performance and also the social performance of 160 million person days of employment. Similar thing in hotels. I mean, all of you are obviously, you've seen the ITC hotels. When we invested in green buildings and made it the greenest luxury hotel chain in the world, and in fact, 3 of them have become net zero carbon just a couple of days back, and which is much ahead of the Paris commitments actually in terms of what we should do per room. Now, those hotels, when we invested there, right, in terms of making them green, today it is one of the lowest in industry in terms of heat and energy costs, right? So therefore, that adds to profitability and also adds to a huge value proposition for me when we say responsible luxury, that you can, because I sell sleep to all of you, and basically I can give you the bells and whistles, but I can give you a clear conscience that when you're sitting with my hotel or you're entertaining in my hotel, you're actually doing it with the lowest footprint. Third is similar thing like in climate smart agriculture, where an area which is most vulnerable. By doing those right things, you've enabled GHG emissions to come down by 47%, but also get your farmers' income up by 80%. And this is with hundreds and thousands of farmers. And what I'm trying to say is that all this has led to both profitability, which is shareholder value creation at one end, and larger stakeholder value creation at the same end. And that is how the company has become carbon positive and water positive and so on. And we have even more stricter, sustainability 2.0 goals that we're doing too. So therefore, the
Nazeeb, I think you may have a network issue at your end. Yeah, he's dropped off. Till Nazeeb is able to log back on, Rahul, when we were speaking earlier, we were talking about how your business is quite different and you're very much within the services industry. So would you like to share with us your view on this?
No, absolutely. And I'd like to take off from what Nazeeb was saying in terms of making sustainability a core component of the organization strategy. And I fully agree with that view. And I would like to chime in with that note. At Datamatics, we look at sustainability. That initiative we've had is focused around employment and education. And with the whole agenda of driving value with a focus on uplifting people and the society. And that's been the thrust. Looking at the SDG objectives, the 17 that are there, and I was just looking at it, we would touch 4 of them with this agenda of education and employability. One is quality education, which is goal number 4, goal number 5, which is gender equality, goal 8, which is decent work and economic growth, and goal 10, which is reduced inequality. So we do touch upon these four very specifically. So at Datamatics, we are focusing on segments of society that would normally not have the opportunities that no, you and I would have under normal circumstances. So we are looking at the high school graduates and training them. We've trained several thousand people and making them employable so that when they finish the training programs, they can get quality jobs. We are engaging women who cannot leave their homes for a variety of reasons. Either they've had just given birth to a child and therefore they have to be homebound. They're looking after aged parents or in-laws. In India, particularly, you have those social situations. So employing women, and we have over 1,000 women who are working with us today. But this program has been running for over 20 years. So over 20 years, we've had several thousand women working with Datamatics who work from home. Today, of course, all of us are very familiar with the work from home model, but that is only 2 years old. Datamatics has been doing it for over 20 years, where we've had women working from home. And the beauty is it gave them the flexibility of hours. They could work at night, they could work in the day, and things like that. We worked with physically challenged people, particularly people who are lower limb challenged, and that allowed them to connect to our systems, log in, and provide services on a global basis, even though they could not commute to work. And we've had a few hundred people of that type working with us. We've got several hundred transgender people working in the company. And again, that's a segment of society that very often gets overlooked, or they don't have the same opportunities that you and I would have. So we have several hundred of them working with the company. And then we've got the whole model around rural working, where we've employed women who are living in villages and working on live international projects that has otherwise they would not be able to work. They would be working in the field, in the farms, or just as domestic labor. And this gave them a very good opportunity to work in a high quality environment in offices on intellectual work. And there again, we've had several hundred women working. So our focus has been on employing these segments of society that would normally not get the opportunity to work on such projects. So, and here what we've done is we've established a symbiotic relationship that is both self-sustaining and socially transformative. It has to be self-sustaining because there's a benefit to the organization and there's a benefit to those people working, and then there's a benefit to the society at large. And that makes it a perpetual engine. Otherwise, it's a one-way traffic, which does make it difficult from a business point of view. So we've provided jobs to women and the underrepresented segments of society. They earn money. That gives them a lot of financial independence, particularly women who are dependent on their families or their husbands or whoever. And in the villages, more so, that's accentuated. So here it gives them a lot of independence, financial independence, self-respect, because otherwise they would be at home not working, or even those who are physically challenged. It gives them an opportunity to earn income by themselves. They contribute to the family income and the disposable income. In the rural parts, we found that they end up contributing to about 30 to 50% of the family income, which is quite significant. And it makes a big difference in the lives of that entire family. In rural India, you find that there's a huge debt issue, and families, 50 to 75% of the families are heavily indebted. And when they have debt, they are paying interest roughly in the range of about 30%, which is very heavy. And as you know, in India, you even have farmers who commit suicide because of the debt burden and they cannot, repay the debts. We've enabled them to reduce this debt impact because they're earning, they're contributing 30 to 50% of the income of the family. Not only that, but they've formalized they're now in the formal employment scheme. So therefore, they've got a bank account, they've got a formal salary, and what have you. And this allows them then to go to the bank and raise loans. And when you do that, your interest burden comes down to about 12 to 14% from a high of 30%. So that's a huge saving for that family. And again, once you're in the formal sector, it gives you several other advantages. Several of these women that we worked with and these transgenders or the handicapped, they are also very entrepreneurial. And I'll go into the training that we provide them, but many of them have started their own enterprise. Once they've sort of gone through 2, 3, 4 years of working with Datamatics. And here we have even funded them. So we've provided seed capital, we've provided them computers, we provide them live jobs when they start their own business. So it gives them a launching pad to initiate their own business in the area that we operate in, which is business process outsourcing and technology. Some of them branch out into different businesses like a beauty parlor or a tailoring shop or something like that, which is very heartening. And very recently, I met one of them actually, and that person has now got probably something like 500 or 600 employees. So that's very, very heartening to see that, they started off as an individual person. We gave them seed capital. They've employed a few people. We gave them computers, and today there are 500 or 600 people working for them. That is, to me, extremely heartening to see them, stepping out and doing that kind of work.
Great to know. Great to know, Rahul. That's really insightful. Yeah.
On the training front, we've trained them on how to use a computer, trained them on English language, project management, scheduling, planning, crisis management, client management, people management, communication. So all of these things, lend them. It gives them the business skills required to run their own businesses. The social impact of that, if you really look at, is the jobs give them a better social standing. The money is used for better medical services. The women and transgender people who very often in India are seen as liabilities in the family are now seen as assets because they're earning for the family, they're earning income, they can stand on their own feet. The value of these young women, particularly in the matrimonial market, improves because suddenly they're earning money, they can afford to pay their own dowry, so they become a little selective as to what kind of a partner to choose. Because they're working, the marriageable age gets postponed, and that helps in reducing child marriage. Because in India, we do have an issue with child marriage. And also, when you postpone your marriageable age, you postpone the childbearing, and therefore the impact on the health of the mother, because she's not having a child at the age of 15, but probably at the age of 21 or 22. So those impacts. They're using this money.
So I think, Rahul, thanks so much. I think maybe we could get back to this in more detail because it's clearly a lot of good and a lot of impact that's being made by Datamatics, which is really, really creditable. So we could perhaps circle around to this again.
Sure.
Suresh, would you like to go ahead and share with us some of what Nestle India is doing?
Thank you. Thank you, Vitali. I think, at Nestle, sustainability is 167 years old. It's a very old concept in the company. It started with the founder, Henri Nestle. Henri Nestle began his entrepreneurial journey in the food business by saving the life of a child. And in saving the life of a child in Switzerland in the 19th century, he set in place a few things that became the DNA for the organization. Number one, he set in motion the principle that the corporation or the company or the Nestle can succeed only if society also thrives. That is the first principle. Secondly, because we began our business in the area of baby food, it also became imperative that whatever quality, whatever safety, whatever nutrition we offer has to be of the highest standard and the highest class. Emanating from this, therefore, has been the fundamental philosophy of the organization that sustainability, fairness, and partnerships are part of the conviction of the organization, and this is not something that is imposed on the organization. When you take something as a conviction, then you find ways and means of implementing it all across the value chain, and you do not try and put it in the sphere of either making a kind of advertising statement, or indeed making a kind of a publicity on what is essence of what your organization stands for. So conviction, consumer sensitivity, and the fact that brands have all along been chosen by consumers basis how they feel about a brand. When you say, how does a brand resonate with the consumer? At the visceral level, it could be physical and the quality characteristics of the company, of the brand. But at a more fundamental level, it is also on what the brand is seen to do for society and seen to do for people in that society to which it belongs. So to that extent, moving beyond financial results and really taking care of the ecosystem. And at Nestle, the belief is always an ecosystem. It is not one single entity or one single individual. It is an ecosystem. So if you look at it in that sense, I think what we have done over the past many decades, I would just summarize a few of the programs that we have done as a company and draw on the inspiration of what has been done globally. Long before water consumption, energy consumption, greenhouse gas reduction were to become boardroom conversations, at Nestle, because of the background of the company and because of the fact that it operated in an environment like Switzerland with the highest environmental standards, there were certain measures that were set and that have become important to the organization. So in the last, for example, last 15 years, the amount of water, the amount of energy, the amount of greenhouse gas reduction has been anywhere between 50 and 60%. Today, we have technologies with the company that is capable of using the water in the milk, in the liquid milk, to do the maintenance activities of the factory and thereby reduce the withdrawal of groundwater by 15 to 20%. So technologies have also been supported to the sustainability cause. And this is an important dimension of what we do as a company. I talked about partnerships, and what are these partnerships? Partnerships, I will talk to you about 2-3 of them, which I believe are significant. In India, Nestle deals with about 100,000 farmers in the Punjab and Rajasthan and in parts of Haryana. These 100,000 farmers are dairy farmers, and out of the 100,000 farmers, there are 70,000 female dairy farmers. Long before diversity became a conversation in boardrooms and became the subject of what we now call as ESG, it was an integral part of the organization, and it is historically established. It's not me who has done it as a leader, but it has been done by generations of my predecessors who made this a key goal, saying that partnerships and longer-term partnerships is an essential part of how the company will operate. So therefore, partnership with dairy farmers, 100,000 of them, has carried on for almost 6 decades. So we are about 6 decades plus of manufacturing history in this country. And about 6 decades has been the kind of partnerships we have had with dairy farmers. And this is not just a question of going and buying their milk. It's a question of sustainable agri practices, breed, feeding practices, enteric fermentation, and other methods of conserving food, of energy, of utilizing energy, reducing the amount of methane that is generated in the dairy farms. All of this has been part of the partnership that the company has had. And especially even during the pandemic, I'm very happy to say that every single drop of milk that was produced on these farms was collected by the company. So we stuck to our trust, because trust is an essential element of partnership. The next area probably that is interesting is what we do on coffee. And this program is also about more than a decade old. It's called the Nescafe Plan. We work in about 3 states in the south, about 4,500 farmers. And with them, we have been working on 3 aspects: livelihoods, responsible sourcing, and environmental impact. I'm delighted, Mitali, that in the last decade, we've had an 18% improvement in the yield of these coffee farmers, a 23% reduction of water on these coffee farms. And what's more important, because they produce the finest quality of coffee, on average, they've had an earning which is 3.50 rupees per kilogram, higher than the average cost of coffee on the market, which means that they earn more as well. And almost 7,000 to 8,000 tons of coffee has been procured to this. We have got dedicated people who work with these farmers. So that's the Nescafe plan. A similar plan has been done on spices, because we are big users of spices as well in the country. So in relevant states, about 6 states across the country, we work with spice farmers, again on sustainable agri practices, sustainable incomes, quality, and ensuring that the standards that they maintain are the highest standards that the company subscribes to. All this has started from that journey in Henri Nestle's life of saving the life of a child. And that has led to all these steps that we've taken. I would just like to leave with two comments, I think, which are interesting. I talked about diversity. One of the steps that we have taken on diversity in the last 5 years, the proportion of women in the Nestle organization has improved from about 15-16% to about 25%. And just about less than 6 months ago, we inaugurated our factory in Sanand in Gujarat, which has 65% female factory operators. 65%. We said this is a statement we want to make. Mitali, it is sad to see that the female participation ratio in our workforce is declining rapidly. So unless corporates set this in motion of having in the manufacturing sector, the services sector, in Rahul's sector, I don't think it's a big deal. Having 60-70% women is not a big deal, because in the tech sector, it's very, very aggressive and active. But in manufacturing, all the cultural impediments, all the social impediments come into play. And we are very happy that we've been able to implement this factory. It is also digitally the most advanced factory. Every operation of that factory is paperless. And it is a wonder to see how young women are coping with manufacturing. And I do hope that this becomes a kind of an inspiration. But it becomes an inspiration for others to do it. The last bit, being a food company, and Nazeeb had referred to it, we are also a big user of plastic. And we realize that plastics can create a lot of impact on the environment. So one of the things that we have been doing as a company, and I'm happy to say that in the last 2 years, the company has been plastic neutral. So the plastic that is used in our brands is recycled in equivalent terms in terms of the existing recycling facilities available in the country. Of course, there is more that needs to be done, because recycling facilities is still an area of infrastructure development. But in all this, I think the centerpiece has been what is good for the society is good for the company. What is good for the brand and what is good for the consumer is also good for the profits and good for the health of the corporate going forward. So this virtuous circle that has been found and that has been formed, at the center sits the DNA of the organization, which is what Henri Nestle said, that the company can survive and thrive only when the community around it also survives and thrives. And I think this philosophy has worked well for us. I'm happy to say that we have been for 110 years in this country, going from strength to strength. 99% of what we sell in this country is produced in this country. And I think this partnership and this enabling environment that we have tried to create with all the stakeholders is cause for inspiration for the future as well. And I'm happy to say that this journey will be a journey that Nestle will follow with all the passion and all the commitment at its disposal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suresh. Thank you so much. Could we maybe then pop over to Jonathan, who's joining us from London? Jonathan, would you like to share your views on, what are the kind of conversations you're having in this space?
Sure. Thank you, Mitali, and hello, everyone. I guess my perspective will be different from Suresh's, probably more similar to Rahul's. So at Kantar, with our change in ownership structure recently, and as we build Kantar as an independent entity, we're obviously aiming high in ESG, or environmental, social, and governance obligation from the outset. But the bigger impact we can have as a services business is through the work for our clients, and the work of our sustainable transformation practice, which is now advising more than 300 different clients across the world, including working on our own ESG strategy. So why did we launch the sustainable transformation practice? Well, partly, of course, because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's increasingly seen as business critical by our clients. In fact, to answer your question in brief, Mitali, going forward, brands will have to be sustainable in order to be profitable. Now, why do I say that? Because I think we are now in an era of disruption. We have been since what economists would call the Great Moderation up to 2008. We're now in an era where we're in a waves of constant disruption. And if businesses don't change, they will disappear. So Mark Carney, the UN Special Envoy on the Environment, talked about how if companies and industries failed to adjust to this new world, they would simply fail to exist. And I think this is backed up by the financial community as well. So if you talk to ratings agencies, certainly, I was talking to one of the rating agencies recently where they said, look, in terms of trends, the intensity of ESG factors is increasing. The interest is increasing amongst investors, and therefore the relevance will continue to increase in the future. And in fact, our investment banking partners would talk about how this is what investors want to see. It's not only a market expectation, it is a must-have amongst corporations now. It has a material impact upon how businesses are perceived in the marketplace, and frankly on their ability to access capital. Now, if you think in very stark terms, 65% of the global economy now is legally committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. So you've got the regulatory environment, you have these risk factors that we've been talking about, that we know about, but it's also a huge opportunity to drive profitability. So you have people like Paul Polman, ex-CEO of Unilever, saying, that sustainability is not just the right thing to do, it is essential to drive business growth. And certainly when you look at our data, Kantar's data, and you look at the spending power of the most sustainably engaged, just in the CPG market alone globally, that's worth $382 billion. And if you look at the work that's been done by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, they talk about $12 trillion of opportunity on an annual basis that is on the table. And not only that, of course, but when you're thinking about internal stakeholders, so employees and the war for talent, we know from work from Globescan and Deloitte that 75% plus of millennials and Gen Zers looking at companies' sustainability strategy, wanting to work for organizations whose values align with their own. And indeed, if you look at the media community, you look at, for example, the Financial Times, so typically a right of center publication a couple of years ago launched its new agenda. It called for a reset of capitalism. So far from being in contradiction, I think, Mitali, sustainability and profitability are two sides of the same coin. And what's more, the marketing function, where probably many of the audience for this webinar will no doubt be sitting in organizations, marketing, I would say, has a singular power and skills to effect the transition that businesses recognize is now needed, because marketing has that power to create tangible and exciting visions of the future, but also to explain through communications the benefits of this critical transition to a zero carbon world.
Thank you, Jonathan. Nazeeb, welcome back. I think we're all struggling with internet and electricity and all manner of things in our hot summer months. You got cut off.
I'm sorry,
would you like to complete? Yes.
No, I think I said most of it. I just wanted to say at that point of time that you talked about two sides of a coin. I think sustainability is the currency of the future. That's all. That's all I would like to place on board here, and can move on with the rest. Sorry for dropping out. Murphy's Law works the best, and sometimes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Anirban, if we can go over to you and you can share with us your thoughts on this and some of what's happening in the Mahindra Group.
Thank you, Mithali. Having listened to the other panelists, I can only promise old wine in a new bottle. Usually, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about the subject as if it is something new. So let me start by reinforcing the point that Suresh mentioned, that for organizations, sustainability is not new. Organizations have always tried to be sustainable. What has changed is that the things that businesses need to do to be sustainable from here onwards have evolved. Today, the definition of sustainability that we in the Mahindra Group have adopted for a commercial enterprise is to build an enduring business while rejuvenating the environment and enabling stakeholders to rise. You could say that businesses are on a new path of sustainability. At Mahindra, the new journey of sustainability was triggered by a desire to do the right thing and is fueled by the realization that we can do much more than what we thought could be done. We have committed to be carbon neutral by 2040. Along the way, we will double energy productivity, adopt 100% renewable energy, be water positive, ensure no waste to landfill, adopt material circularity practices, and promote biodiversity, aspects of which we have already heard in today's conversation. Let me just give you a sense of what is possible from the experience that we've had already. On a base of 2009, we have increased energy productivity to make cars by 74%, are using around 45% renewable energy in our energy mix, are already water positive, have 17 zero waste to landfill factories, and have grown close to 20 million trees. All of this is possible, and many large organizations around the world are doing things of this nature and at scale. As a group, we have invested in many green businesses like electric mobility, solar energy, micro irrigation, and just 4 days ago, launched the construction of India's first net zero energy residential project. All of this is happening in the space of business and in the areas of the offerings we have for consumers. One of our projects in rural development, very closely connected to our tractor business, has actually helped triple per capita income for 40,000 Indians in a 5-year span. These are the opportunities which are there for organizations to take to do business in a more responsible, sustainable manner in the future and ensure that it endures for the next 50 or 75 years. That said, there is still a long way to go because it's not an easy journey. Misconceptions like sustainability is CSR, or sustainability is an additional cost, or even sustainability is the government's responsibility must be overcome. From the examples that you've heard today, you can see that these are indeed misconceptions. Investments must be made in new technologies to reduce emissions and use natural resources more responsibly. The saving grace is that many climate solutions give very high returns on investment. The last 250 crores invested by us in climate solutions have created an annual saving stream of around 145 crores a year. This kind of return on investment sometimes doesn't even come from the overall core business. But investment in climate solutions have a possibility of giving us these kinds of returns. Therefore, the question has moved from business or sustainability or profitability or sustainability, as you had posited right at the beginning of the conversation, to better business through sustainability actions. We are fortunate that we are based out of India, which is the only G20 country that is on track to meet its climate commitments. You may have heard that India has the largest LED lighting program, but maybe you haven't heard that we also have a very large energy efficient motors program, have access to super energy efficient air conditioning equipment, and the electric mobility transformation is well and truly on. For a country where the population and economy are still growing, a commitment to be net zero by 2070 is ambitious indeed. Taking all this into consideration, the Mahindra Group once articulated the connection between business and sustainability as people plus planet is equal to profit. And we've had plenty of examples today that help explain why this identity will hold true in the future.
Thank you so much, Anirban, and thank you so much, all the panelists. Before I go over and share a few questions that were triggered by our meeting, I'd like to address those who are attending this meeting. Thank you so much for being here. For many of you, it's late evening in India. We really appreciate you being here. I just wanted to share this is a rare opportunity for you to ask questions live to our illustrious panelists. So please do type in your questions in the chat box that you'll find. And we hope that we have time at the end of this session to answer some of those and pose those to our panel. Okay, thank you. So actually one of the things that got a question that got triggered with the earlier part of this discussion, which I will put to Nazeeb, is do you feel that sustainability is a corporate imperative, or is it something that needs to be embedded in each of the brands under the corporate, or is it really the same thing? Is it a symbiotic relationship? What do you feel?
Yeah, so ideally, Mitali, I think, I mean, if it is embedded in brands and embedded in the larger corporate, obviously that would be the most ideal thing to do. But you know, in the journey of brands, when there are new brands being incubated and when you're launching new brands, and we are really in a different journey there, the sustainability journey can also be very different for each brand. I think for the larger impact to happen, right, it is always net. What can happen as an enterprise makes a lot of sense, and that's where the tough job is. I think all the speakers you mentioned about various elements of the picture. When you put all these together and ensure that you move towards a net zero for the enterprise itself, I think that is when we start making very important steps towards the goals that we need to go through to make that meaningful difference. Because you know, all brands, it is very important that each product perhaps becomes sustainable, right? But in the journey overall, I think the enterprise needs to look at goals like today Anirban mentioned and Mr. Narayanan, I heard mentioning, right, from diversity to various things, all add to this entire picture of how we can contribute to a sustainable and secure tomorrow. I would go for certainly making the big difference with the enterprise level. But yes, I mean, the step doesn't mean that we should not do it at the brand level as well. Both add to each other.
Absolutely. Suresh, would you like to weigh in with your thoughts? Do you feel that the enterprise is the sum of the parts of the brands, or how do you feel this is?
No, I think I tend to, in part, agree with what Nazeeb says, because I think it, you know, ultimately there are two wheels that are operating that we need to be cognizant of. One is the wheel of the brand, and the brand begins with the brand promise, to the brand to the brand process, to the brand operations, to the brand outcomes, and to the brand results. And I think that whole circle involves in itself the journey of sustainability. Every brand has to have a practice in making it, in conceiving it and making it happen, that has to be sustainable, because otherwise the corporate can never achieve that goal. So at one level, I think it is important for the brands to embed themselves with the sustainability practices that are important for a corporation, because ultimately what the consumer buys or the consumer sees of a company is not a Nestle or an ITC. They buy the brands of the company. So therefore, I think the brand has to have the overarching message of sustainability embedded in its being for the consumer. On the other hand, there is a federating approach that is taken by the company, by the corporate, to string together various initiatives, be it around partnerships, around diversity, around planet, around water, around whatever areas are being looked at. And that needs to be a separate flywheel that runs all the way through. So one provides the meaning, which is the brand, and the other provides the purpose, which is the corporate entity doing this, talking about this day in and day out. So, in a sense, what Nazeeb is saying is a similar thought, that there has to be an overarching corporate purpose behind what is being done, and there has to be a translation in the brands. Otherwise, the whole edifice will fall apart. If the brands don't talk a sustainable journey, at least in our kind of business, in the consumer goods business, if the brands don't talk the language of sustainability, the corporate can keep talking, shouting itself hoarse, but nobody's going to see that happening in terms of the brands that the company offers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Suresh. There was another question also that was triggered by the earlier part of our discussion, which I'll pose to Anirban, which is, what is the role of the consumer in all of this? We've been looking at it from our duty as businesses or corporates. Do you think that there's a dynamic here or give and take between the corporate and the consumer? And where does the responsibility lie?
Mithali, some months ago, we did a little survey to find out how consumers perceive climate green solutions or new products which have a climate proposition and so on. We discovered that awareness levels are very high already. We also discovered that the intent to act is very high. But a large proportion, I think close to 76, 77% of the respondents said that even if we want to, we don't necessarily have sustainable solutions available for us. So one of the first things that corporates need to do or businesses need to do is make climate solutions available or make solutions available for consumer needs which are sustainable in nature. So you know that every toothbrush ever made still exists on the earth, but we still continue to buy plastic toothbrushes, probably because the bamboo toothbrush has not addressed all the 4 Ps that it needs to address to become popular. I don't know how many more Ps there are these days. So at the corporate level, one important thing for businesses is to make solutions available, just like it has made cars available and iPhones available and various other things available, because unless you have action on the supply side, it cannot be supported on the demand side. On the consumer side, as these products are coming, there will always be innovators. And in this forum, I don't have to talk about, the S-curve and the early adopters and so on. Everybody knows about all that. So there will be innovators. And there are many colleagues of ours, friends of ours, who are very conscious about the climate, about the planet, and so on. And given a chance, they go and buy products which are responsible, which are made with planetary benefits in mind and so on. But then they are not the large majority. And the large majority will move only when there is a solution available which meets their needs and which is also climate friendly. So all the rules for new product adoption or new brand adoption continue to exist and will exist for green products. Only the profile of the innovators will be different, because for them, they will be looking at climate solutions. And I have friends who have figured out a way of using more climate friendly products than anybody else, really. Some of us think they are mavericks, but maybe they are the ones who are leading the way into the future. So in summary, corporates must make climate friendly solutions available for consumers to adopt. The innovators will start the whole journey, but as the products start delivering on the number of P's that are relevant today, we will see wider and wider adoption of these products. We're experiencing, we've experienced it in renewable energy. We are seeing it happening in electric vehicles, and I hope it becomes more and more popular going forward.
Thank you, Anirban. Jonathan, a question to you, perhaps putting the consumer at the heart of all of this. It just struck me that there seems to be, I came into this with a perception actually before I heard the panel, that in some way consumers have proven to be a little fickle. So I think perhaps early thinking was to say it's a bit of a fad, and you have tree huggers and it's something you do at a certain age and you grow out of it and sort of just become normal. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so needless to say, I guess Kantar has done a lot of work into this space, and I think one thing we have to recognise at the outset is that it's a fact that people do blame business as well as government, federal and local, for many of the societal and environmental problems that we're facing. So I think globally, our data shows that 79% of people hold large corporates responsible for our environmental challenges. And so when brands do look to take action, I think we're faced by a lot of skepticism. We know that 63% of people across the world are cynical about the motivations of brands in this space. But what we do know, Mitali, is that consumers want to see change. So globally, over half are paying attention to social environmental issues and investing their time and money in companies perceived to be doing the right thing. And we know that in India, that rises to, amazingly, it rises to 77% of people who are prepared to invest time and money in companies that try to do good. So this is clearly, as has been mentioned already, a very live issue in India. But, and this is a big but, consumers don't feel like it's down to them to clean up the mess. They don't feel like sustainability is their responsibility. So they're expecting businesses to lead the transformation. And I think, the UN says that the transformation cannot be achieved without the private sector. And I think when you look at the annual CEO survey of the world's largest corporations, virtually all of the CEOs believe sustainability is critical to their company's future success. And I think the reason this isn't going away is because of the fundamental shifts we're seeing in consumer society. And this is why, in answer to your question, Mitali, it's not about fickleness or something which is going to go away anytime soon, because we're in a fundamental generational break at the moment. So the first break after the Second World War gave rise to individualism. This break is going to be marked by a turning away from individualism towards a greater sense of community led by Gen Z. So in answer to your question, consumer attitudes to sustainability are only going to become more and more entrenched.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Rahul, if I could address this question to you, because, of course, consumers aren't just people who go into stores and buy fast-moving consumer products. There are all kinds of stakeholders, and you have seen a lot of B2B consumers and customers, and you've seen their response to conversations around sustainability. So would you like to share something with us on that?
Sure. Most of our customers are large corporates and global. And I think many of them are very sensitive to these kinds of issues. We find that when they see the kind of work that we are doing, they are highly appreciative of the impact we are making on the larger society. And that, in that many ways, gives us an advantage when we compete in the marketplace against competition, because they see an organization that is far more socially responsible, that is taking very active steps in contributing to society, and particularly to a segment of society that is underserviced or underprivileged in some ways. So in that sense, it does give an advantage. And more importantly, it's a very feel-good factor when they're working with a company that is as socially sensitive as some of the others are here on the panel. So in that sense, yeah. But we don't directly interact with consumers. It's more a business-to-business kind of situation. Also, when we interact with government agencies at times, they are very, very appreciative. One of our largest customers is the United Nations globally, and they are very, very sensitive to these kinds of matters all the time. And that's when, you know, they like working with organizations such as us. And more importantly, they engage with us. Sometimes we do joint programs. So it's not about just you know, appreciating it, but the joint program, it goes a long way.
Thanks so much, Rahul. Thank you. So we have, I think, time for just one question. Though we've had a number of them, which we will answer, we request the panelists to answer after this session. And I think this is around this cataclysmic event that's happened in all of our lives in recent times, which is the COVID pandemic. So, you know, the first thing you think about is that it made the workforce work from home, which was a big discontinuity. What does the panel feel about the COVID pandemic? Where has it been an inflection point? Has it been a force of good for the sustainability journey? Any thoughts, anyone from the panel?
Look, I think the COVID, the pandemic, in a sense, has been the pivotal point of a leadership shift from competence, pure competence, to competence and compassion. And I think what has really happened in organizations which are sensitive to people and sensitive to the way in which we treat people has been that the safety, the security, the well-being of the people has become front and center. It was earlier a contractual obligation. The pandemic has made it a compulsive obligation. So it is something that you cannot, that if you're a leader of any stature, you cannot walk away from, or you can't turn a blind eye to. I mean, I keep saying this to my people that in a crisis, you don't run a company, but you serve a family. And I think that is something that the pandemic has really dawned upon many of us. And in fact, if you look at the single most important characteristic, I was reading a survey some time back that talked about what are the essentials of organizations of the future. Two abilities of organizations, in fact, three abilities of organizations stood out. Number one is inspiring and compassionate leadership. Number two is innovative capabilities. And number three is sustainability and the business practices of the company. So you can see that in a normal situation, what might have been corporate performance or some other metric of financial well-being has now been displaced by inspiring leadership. And even that inspiring leadership defined further as authentic leadership. People don't want Albert Einsteins as bosses. They want normal human beings who feel and think and who have the same kind of emotions like everybody else and who don't pretend to be grander than they are.
Let me add another new, I will call it new, something else that we realized was actually possible. So many things happened during COVID, but one of the things that became very clear is that we could have clean, clear air in India. If you've noticed photographs on Facebook, photographs taken in, say, many foreign lands, we usually appreciate the beauty. But the first thing that strikes me is the crispness and the cleanness of the air in which the photograph was taken, as a result of which the beauty could be seen so much better. During the COVID time, when all of us had stepped back into our houses, the air became so much cleaner. I mean, when I looked out of the window, I could actually see buildings beyond the waterfront, and which normally one wouldn't see. And then you heard stories of water in the Yamuna and animals here and birds there and so on. Probably this was one reason why the sensitivity towards sustainability and ESG suddenly boomed in this 2-year period. Because if we look at the intensity of the ESG conversation post-COVID, it's way beyond what it was pre-COVID, and happened in these 2 years while we were all working from home. So this is definitely one change and one possibility that COVID has opened our eyes to once again, that we in India can actually have clean air and a whole bunch of other good natural stuff. But let's just talk about clean air.
I think, Mitali, that those very, very important points Mr. Narayan and Anirban just brought out. I've always looked at it that, if the pandemic showed the entire fragility of all of us, right? I mean, when there were situations, you couldn't get a hospital bed, you didn't know for the love of life, you couldn't get a oxygen somewhere. That fragility word has an agility inside there, and that led to tremendous amount of agility, whether it was in innovation, whether it was in collaboration, whether it was in adapting to things, whether it was creating something. And I think for me at this point of time, the COVID signaled change and the pace of change like never before. I think people did things in days which they would have done in years. And we've all done that, whether it was putting up factories in 10 days time, getting distribution right and putting everything in place, getting new products from, conception to the market in just about weeks time. But those was just one part of the story. I think what it has told us is that you can certainly do innovation with agility, be resilient, deal with all the issues that today, if you tell me climate change was a big issue, inequality is a big issue, I know we can find solutions. And I know we can find solutions because what this also showed was the power of collaboration. I mean, I've set up hospitals in a week's time, working with local, government and others, and so on and so forth. And the power of collaboration was immense, right? And I think if all of us around the table want to join hands as power of one to solve issues like sustainability, today the COVID has proved that we can do it. And I think that's a big thing, that change is going to be fast. There are tremendous challenges, but there'll be tremendous opportunities in the intersection of digital, sustainability, innovation, and technology. And people will drive all of this. And I think that's a great lesson at this point.
Can I just build on what Nazeeb's saying there? Because I think one of the things for us is I think that the pandemic has really brought into view the reality that the volatility that we've seen since the turn of the century is not going away anytime soon. And I think it's part of a broader pattern of disruption and uncertainty. And I guess to put it simply, disruptions now are the new normal. And I think they will become a feature of the marketplace that all of us as businesses just have to deal with as business as usual. I think the interesting thing relating it back to sustainability, Mitali, is that I think what disruptions do is they accelerate underlying trends. And there is no doubt that social and environmental factors were already bubbling under in India and across the world, and they're only going to accelerate as a result of the pandemic and other disruptions.
Right. Thanks, Jonathan. So thank you. I think we're slightly over time. Rahul, do you have any few words you'd like to say in sum, and then I think we can probably
I think it is very important the board of all companies take this responsibility of encouraging the organization to come up with innovative solutions. A vanilla solution does not work, and I think there's a lot of value in these innovative solutions of engaging the larger SDG objectives in the corporate strategy. By default, it won't happen, but if they do that, I think there's a huge opportunity for all, for the benefit of the company as well as the stakeholders. So I do think they should take that on.
Right, right. So I thank you so much to the panel. Thank you so much for being here with us, for giving us time. I think for helping MRSI host out of India a very, very topical discussion, which I think is relevant for the globe at large. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, audience, as well, for attending. We really appreciate your participation, and we'll get back on the questions. I'll just end this with a lot of people, when we talked about this panel, said, well, where's the insight in it? Where's the market research in it? And I just like to end this discussion by saying this is the first of our 2 events that MRSI is hosting at the International Market Research Day. We have a second event where we have 6 presentations where where insight has actually made a difference on issues like getting clean drinking water to the remotest areas in India, inclusivity as a culture for certain brands, waste management and segregation, sustainability at large, helping slum dwellers to achieve health and sanitation. So these are the topics that will be discussed tomorrow. Please join us at 3:30, where 6 teams present and tell you how insight made a difference in this. Again, thank you so much, panel. Thank you so much, and good night, and of course, good afternoon, I think, to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mithali. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.